was a typical Friday night, and Sarah had just finished hanging out with friends at a bar. Since it was getting late, she decided to call an Uber to head home. After a few minutes, her ride arrived and everything seemed normal at first. The driver greeted her with a smile, asked her about her night, and turned on the music. However, as they drove deeper into the city, Sarah started to feel uneasy. The driver, who had been following the GPS on his phone, suddenly began taking turns that weren't indicated on the map. She politely mentioned it, thinking maybe there was a shortcut she didn't know about, but the driver brushed her off, saying the GPS was confusing. The uneasy feeling in Sarah's stomach grew worse when the driver suddenly took an exit off the highway into a deserted industrial area. The roads were empty, no lights in sight, and no other cars. At this point, Sarah was terrified. She asked the driver where they were going, but he remained silent, locking the car doors and accelerating slightly. Sarah frantically texted her friends, sharing her live location, and prepared to call 911. She demanded the driver to stop, but he ignored her pleas. The tension in the car was unbearable as she noticed he was nervously tapping the steering wheel and occasionally glancing back at her through the rearview mirror. Suddenly, the car came to a stop at a red light in the middle of nowhere. Without thinking twice, Sarah yanked the door handle, managing to unlock it just in time to leap out. She sprinted to a nearby gas station and called the police. By the time authorities arrived, the Uber driver was gone, and despite providing all the details to the police, they were never able to track him down. It was supposed to be a weekend of relaxation and adventure for a group of five friends who had been planning a camping trip for months. They drove out to a secluded forest area, far away from any towns or cities, eager to disconnect and enjoy nature. The first day went by smoothly. They set up their tents, started a campfire, and laughed late into the night. But things took a dark turn on the second night. After a long day of hiking, they all went to bed early, exhausted from the day's activities. Around 3 a.m., Jason, one of the group members, woke up and noticed something strange. His friend Ryan, who had been sharing the tent with him, was gone. Thinking Ryan had gone for a walk or to the bathroom, Jason didn't think much of it. Hours passed, and when the sun rose, Ryan was still nowhere to be found. Panic began to set in as the friends split up and began searching the surrounding forest. They called out his name, but only the rustling of leaves answered them. As the hours went by, they found strange things, peculiar symbols carved into the trees, footprints that seemed to appear and disappear without warning, and an eerie silence that seemed to swallow their voices. By midday, they stumbled upon Ryan. He was sitting at the base of a tree, looking dazed and confused, but otherwise unharmed. When asked where he had been, Ryan claimed he didn't know. He vaguely remembered seeing a figure, possibly a woman, beckoning him into the woods. He followed her, mesmerized, but couldn't recall how he ended up back at the campsite. Though relieved to have their friend back, the group felt an unsettling presence in the forest for the remainder of the trip. They packed up and left early the next morning, the eerie encounter hanging over them like a dark cloud. To this day, none of them can explain what happened to Ryan that night. A young man named Josh had recently moved into a new apartment and was looking to sell some old furniture. Like many people, he turned to Craigslist to get rid of his items quickly. A day after posting the ad, he received an inquiry from someone named Mark, who expressed interest in buying his couch. They exchanged a few messages, and Mark agreed to come by and pick up the item the next evening. However, when the time came, Mark didn't show up. Instead, Josh started receiving strange messages from him, messages that had nothing to do with the couch. They were vague but creepy, with Mark mentioning things like Josh's apartment layout, where his windows were, and his daily routine. Josh started feeling uncomfortable, but when he asked about the furniture, Mark's responses would turn evasive or nonsensical. That night, Josh heard noises outside his apartment, like footsteps pacing near his door. He looked through the peephole but saw nothing. Over the next few days, the strange messages continued. Mark seemed to know things about Josh that he hadn't shared, details about what time he left for work, what he had been wearing, and what groceries he had bought. One evening, as Josh was sitting in his living room, his phone buzzed with another message. "Nice shirt," it said. Confused, he glanced down at the blue shirt he was wearing. He froze when he realized there was no way Mark could know what he was wearing unless he was watching him. He slowly approached the window and pulled the curtain back just a crack. Standing outside in the shadows of the street was a man staring directly at his window. Josh immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. The stalking continued for weeks, with strange items left on his porch and more cryptic messages. Despite multiple reports to the police, they were unable to identify the stalker, leaving Josh to live in constant fear.